Welcome back to our channel where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. Today we bring you some news. King Charles just stripped everything of Camilla, not a penny. The crown of regret. How the last confession of a king redrawn the boundaries of the royal family. In what palace insiders are referring to as a last desperate gesture of atonement, King Charles III has essentially shattered the public and private standing of his wife, Queen Camilla, in a sequence of actions that have shook the foundations of the British monarchy. This extraordinary series of events has undermined the foundations of the British monarchy. It has been stated that the king, who is feeble as a result of his fight against illness, has relieved Camilla of all key royal tasks, rewrote his will to exclude her from his personal income, and promoted Catherine, the Princess of Wales, to the position of de facto female figurehead of the monarchy. This royal earthquake was caused by a combination of Camilla's apparent apathy during the king's sickness and the dramatic re-emergence of a long-lost cassette recording carrying a last chilling message from Diana, Princess of Wales, according to reports. Both of these events occurred simultaneously. The problem reached its climax when an audio recording that was supposedly of the king was compromised and published. In the footage, the king can be heard muttering, "I lost a family." The heartfelt confession, which is packed with a lifetime of sorrow, has sparked a firestorm in the media all over the world and sent popular sympathy for the monarch skyrocketing. At the same time, it has presented Queen Camilla as a tragic villain in the closing act of a play that has been going on for decades. The plot of this narrative is not only about a palace intrigue, rather, it is about a monarch addressing his history on the international stage. This is the silent confession of a man who has decided to act while being stuck between the weight of his crown and the weight of his remorse. The whole world is seeing for the very first time a king not only admitting that he was wrong, but also methodically dismantling the very universe that he constructed for the lady whom he loved more than anything else in the world. The question is, what precisely was it on the video that had such a profound impact on a king? And what accounts for the fact that the lady whom he had previously protected with the complete might of the monarchy was abandoned in such a short period of time? A narrative of love, ambition, and a truth that was uttered too late is where the solutions may be found. A letter and a deception that may last a lifetime. On a peaceful morning in July of 2025, the beginning of the end might be recognized. The wrinkled face of King Charles III was illuminated by the gentle light of an ancient desk lamp as he sat in his private library at Buckingham Palace. The sound of birds singing joyfully and the soft rustling of the wind through the royal gardens could be heard from outside the window, but the atmosphere within the chamber was oppressive, bearing the weight of a lifetime's worth of secrets that had been kept hidden from view. There was a letter waiting for him on the mahogany desk that had been polished, and it had just been delivered from the office of Queen Camilla. It was a letter that was sealed with the royal crest, and written in the stiff, indifferent writing of an assistant. It told him in an abrupt manner that she would not be attending the celebration of the Royal Charitable Trust's 50th anniversary, which was an event that he was going to organize that weekend. The explanation that was given was that there was a previously scheduled engagement, but Charles was aware that this was a meaningless excuse. Even though it was just a few sentences long, the letter had the impact of a last and conclusive blow to him. It brought back bitter memories of the previous year, recollections of long, sterile days spent fighting disease, while his wife, the lady for whom he had sacrificed everything, was conspicuously missing all throughout the process. After putting the letter down, he continued to stare intently at the flames that were flickering in the fireplace. It was a harsh and humiliating reminder of Camilla's detachment, of how she had continued to revel in the public limelight, while he silently struggled for his life, and the thin excuse of a busy schedule was a reminder of this. He had his hands squeezed into fists, and they were thin and scarred with age. he started to develop a calm and unwavering determination inside himself. He was not going to allow this cloud of falsehood to bring an end to his reign or his life. The fissures under the crown, which had been covered for a long time for the purpose of maintaining public unity, had become an unmistakable chasm since he had been admitted to the hospital. Charles was aware that he needed to take action now that his health had returned to normal, but his heart was heavy. In his thoughts, a storm was forming, and he had a terrible realization that the days that were to come would not only define his reign, but also the very soul of the man that he was. In the sick room, there was a chilly absence. It is necessary to go back in time to the dreary winter at the beginning of 2024 in order to comprehend the king's extreme choice. In a chamber at Sandringham that was rather peaceful, a dim light filtering through thick silk curtains formed subtle shadows on the face of Charles, who seemed to be exhausted. The air was filled with the constant rhythmic hum of medical machinery, which served as a sharp contrast to the quiet that predominated throughout the magnificent estate. He had been diagnosed with cancer, which had wreaked havoc on his body, making it difficult for him to take a breath. However, as he would later admit in letters to his son, the bodily suffering was nothing in compared to the severe emotional damage that Camilla's frigid absence had inflicted on him. There were days in the hospital that were the longest and most agonizing for him, yet she did not see him. No handwritten messages were left, and there were no phone calls made late at night. Rather than that, there were official updates from her office that were written in the third person, and there was a regular stream of news stories that detailed her actions. Camilla was attending opulent events in London, making polished public appearances with a trained smile, and according to insiders within the palace, conducting covert discussions with advisors concerning her future position in the event that the king's health worsened. All of this was taking place while Charles was lying in bed, pondering his own death. She was praised as a figure of fortitude by the main publications, which continued to adhere to the carefully created narrative of a unified monarchy. Queen Camilla, a picture of timeless grace, and the Queen, a proud icon of the monarchy in a time of crisis, were headlines that appeared in the media, but Charles, who was lying in a hospital bed, saw the reality of the situation. All of it was a flawlessly orchestrated act, a masterpiece in public relations that masked the sad truth that Camilla did not love him. Instead, she adored the crown, the power, and the attention that he afforded. Because of what I caused pain to the lady who loved me the most. According to reports, he said, a hollow crown to a loyal assistant on one of those evenings when he was alone and it was dark. These remarks, which he had wrung out of the depths of his being, marked the beginning of a thorough introspection on his own behavior. An antique picture book that was stored on the bedside table was the object that he grabbed for in his recollection. His shaky fingers scanned over the pages of the old book, each image seeming to be a vivid and eerie ghost. Diana may be seen to be there in a shot that was taken in Highgrove during the summer of 1987. The grin on her face was as sweet and dazzling as the sun that rose in the early summer. She stood behind him. Her desire for the limelight, the crown, or the titles had never been a concern for her. It was simply Charles the man that she had required. She did not need the king of a country. On the other hand, Charles had been dazzled by other temptations at the time, such as Camilla's alluring whispers and the promise of a break from the constraints of his royal duties. He closed his eyes in that hospital room, and a picture of Camilla flashed before him. It was icy and piercing. It was always a subtle reminder of the advantages she had obtained via him, that she was always at the center of the frame, always demanding attention, and always a central focus of the frame. A night that had occurred many years before at Kensington Palace, just prior to the ultimate separation, was remembered by him. Diana had stood in front of him, her eyes welling up with tears, but her voice was unwavering in her determination. She had delivered the words, "You do not have to choose between me and the throne, Charles," with a voice that was shaking but very powerful. These words, which were formerly disregarded as the theatrical pleading of a dissatisfied woman, suddenly reverberated in the sterile quiet of his chamber, as if they were an unavoidable curse. "But if you choose her, you will lose both." Charles had a sense of betrayal during those extended days of sickness. For the sake of Camilla, he had given up everything, including his reputation, his connection with his family, and Diana's affection. And when he was in the most desperate situation, she had shown to him that her actual commitment was not to him, but rather to the organization that he symbolically represented. A public rift has been caused by the incident in South Korea. It had been some months before on the public stage that the groundwork had been set for this secret betrayal. It was not for any diplomatic victories that a state visit to South Korea became an indelible milestone in contemporary royal history. Rather, it was for a sequence of incidents that revealed the fissures at the very core of the monarchy. This visit took place in the latter half of the next year, 2023. In addition to South Korea's First Lady, Kim Keon-hee, who caught the attention of the world press with her young and natural grace, Queen Camilla made an appearance accompanied by her. The difference was striking in the images that were officially released. Camilla, who was dressed in a gown of a deep green color that had been produced by a well-known British fashion business, was rigid and uneasy. She appeared to be a statue from a bygone age that had been inappropriately put in a contemporary environment. Despite the fact that her hands were securely gripping her clutch, her bejeweled fingers were slightly shaking, as if she were trying to stifle a wave of intense uneasiness. Catherine of Wales, the Princess of Wales, was seen standing in the background. She exuded a natural elegance while wearing an ivory gown that was both simple and perfectly made as she wore it. The audience seemed to be captivated by every smile and every act of kindness that was performed. It wasn't because of her jewelry or the clothes she wore, rather it was because of the unmistakable sincerity that emanated from inside her. Because of this, the light seemed to follow her wherever she went. She was instantly referred to as the true jewel of the British monarchy by the South Korean press, and subtle similarities with Camilla started to emerge in the media throughout the world. In an unexpected and much criticized moment, Camilla, who seemed to be conscious of being overshadowed, beckoned for Catherine to go forward and stand near the First Lady. This action was perceived by many royal observers as a passive-aggressive effort to put her into a position that was less favorable to her. The relocation was a disastrous failure completely. When the British press became aware of a story, they immediately launched an unrelenting campaign of comparison. There was a headline that said, "Catherine, the very definition of contemporary royal elegance." And further piece of writing read, "Camilla, a symbol of desperate insecurity." The following is the title of a particularly scathing article that was published by a prominent news organization. She stood next to South Korea's First Lady and looked like a statue from the wrong era. Camilla's pride sustained a severe wound as a result of the criticism, which was like a blade. When she returned to her opulent hotel room in Seoul, she sat by herself and read the articles with a stern look on her face. When a close aide tried to comfort her by saying, "You are still the Queen, Your Majesty," she responded with a slender, icy grin that did not reach her angry eyes. Camilla arranged for Catherine to meet with her that evening in a separate room that was decorated with traditional Korean art. Unspoken anxiety was pervasive throughout the atmosphere. Camilla's voice was icy and authoritative as she said, "Do not wear red whenever you attend the next event. A great deal of attention is drawn to it." Catherine's eyes showed a glimmer of comprehension, but she maintained her normal level of composure as she smiled softly and gave a small nod. She came to the realization that this was not about being fashionable. Rather, it was a warning, a transparent effort to keep her in the shadows and to make sure that the Queen continued to be the center of attention. After a few days had passed, Camilla made her appearance at a state dinner in Seoul, wearing a stunning red gown that was adorned with a ruby tiara and rich ruby jewelry that shone brightly beneath the lights. Although she strode with an attitude of rebellious dignity, her eyes were unable to conceal the dread that she was feeling. That I am the queen, and that no one can take that away from me, was a proclamation that was made with each stride. But the British press was ruthless in its coverage. One tabloid made fun of the situation by stating, "The desperate queen tries to reclaim the spotlight." Another person referred to it as the outfit of contradiction, pointing out that Camilla had barred Catherine from wearing red, yet she broke her own rule in the most obvious manner conceivable. The photographs of Camilla when she was standing by herself and attempting to smile for the cameras became a source of derision on social media. The jealousy and overt manipulation that Camilla displayed was not overlooked by the staff of the royal family. The Kensington Palace, where William and Catherine were getting ready for their next engagement, received a private report that detailed the occurrences that had occurred. William studied the report with his fists clenched and his eyes filled with a repressed wrath that flashed in his eyes. He turned his attention to Catherine, who was selecting a dress in a light blue color for an upcoming charity event in a modest manner. The tone of his voice was low yet determined as he said, "We never wanted to interfere. However, if she really wants to engage in these power games, we will not sit idly by and watch." The conviction in Catherine's eyes was evident as she bowed her head. She whispered, "We are not doing this for power, William," as she began her statement. "The monarchy is the beneficiary of our actions." Both of them were aware that in order to safeguard Diana's legacy and the future of the monarchy, they needed to take action. However, they did not do so with fury. Rather, they did it with intellect, dignity, and an unflinching dedication to their duties. An audio cassette tape and the tears of a king make up the last straw. On the morning of May in the year 2025, William entered his father's chamber at Sandringham. The light was just beginning to peek through the trees, and it was almost summer. The surface of the leather box he carried had worn down by the passage of time. The item included a relic that would profoundly change the path that the monarchy would take in the future. It was an old cassette tape that Diana had recorded during her last difficult days. Accompanying the recording was a little message that was folded and written in her exquisite, quivering handwriting. "For Charles, when he is ready for the truth," was the only thing that was written on the letter. The box was put on the table that was next to the king's bed by William. In a tone that was soft yet authoritative, he continued, "I believe it is important for you to hear this, Father." The package was opened by Charles, whose fingers were shaking very much. At the moment that he saw the tape, his heart was pounding in his chest. In a short amount of time, Diana's voice, which was smooth and soothing but loaded with a deep and familiar anguish, filled the room that was otherwise silent. An assistant was sent in to locate a player. As she started, "Charles," the faint hissing of the ancient cassette added to the eerie mood that was already there. "If you are listening to this, then it is possible that you have finally noticed the truth that I have been trying to show you for a very long time. Never in my life did I want to wear the crown. My only desire was to be with our family. I beg you, please do not allow my memories to be fraught with strife. A person who loves you for who you are and not for the throne is someone you deserve. Do not forget that. Also, please have mercy on our young men. Be sure to guard their hearts." Despite the fact that her voice was decades old, it was able to penetrate Charles's heart like a shard of glass, therefore breaking the last of his illusions around Camilla. As he tightened his fists, he experienced silent tears streaming down his worn cheeks for the very first time since the passing of his mother. He was able to experience the unfiltered and unreserved sincerity that Diana had shown to him, a love that he had exchanged for a lifetime of planned adoration. The tape was the last piece of evidence that was considered to be incriminating. During the darkest periods of his sickness and solitude, his heart had already informed him that Camilla had exploited his love to obtain her position, while Diana had given all to protect their family. This confirmation reinforced what his heart had already told him before. During the same week, Charles called up the members of the royal legal team to Buckingham Palace for a confidential and time-sensitive meeting. The atmosphere in the conference room, which was decorated with photos of his forefathers, became more oppressive. It was with a voice that was weak, yet resounded with the power of a monarch, that he gave his directives. "You will immediately begin the process of stripping Queen Camilla of all official royal duties," he ordered. "This will take effect immediately. The position of the chief female representative of the monarchy at all state and public occasions shall be assumed by Catherine the Princess of Wales from this point forward." The attorneys looked at one another in a startled manner. A constitutional bombshell that would set off a political and media tempest of epic proportions. This was not a modest administrative move, rather it was a fundamental bombshell. Taking a cautious approach, a top advisor made the following statement to the monarch. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, this could have serious and unexpected consequences for the stability of the crown." The conversation was broken abruptly by Charles, whose eyes were burning with a fury that was fed by decades of suffering and sorrow. One of his statements was that the consequences of inaction are far greater. Catherine has the ability to represent the royal family with the honesty and respect that we so sorely need. The conclusion is irrevocable. The destruction of a queen. However, the mood inside the palace started to alter almost immediately after the order was given, despite the fact that it was kept carefully discreet. When the staff walked by Camilla's offices, they muffled their voices and murmured to one another in the long halls of Buckingham Palace. Her most trusted assistants were discreetly relocated, and several of them were seen packing their things as concerned looks were cast over their shoulders. There was a storm on the horizon, and Camilla, who had previously thought of herself as impenetrable, started to feel her throne shaking. She was never the kind of person to readily accept loss. In response to Charles's edict, she reacted with a performance that was precisely planned and prepared. The royal tiara, which was adorned with pearls and rubies, was proudly displayed atop her meticulously arranged hair as she attended a sumptuous press luncheon at Clarence House. As she stood in front of the reporters, her smile was bright but forced, and she posed for each and every camera as if she were trying to announce to the whole world that she was still monarch. But the limelight that she had been working so hard to recover was no longer able to hold the power that it had before. After being enthralled by her narrative of victory in the past, the media now only saw her in a desperate state. The title for one of the articles read, "Camilla, the cracking symbol of a bygone era." The desperate last stand of a queen losing her grip was the name that another person gave to her reception. That evening, Buckingham Palace served as the venue for a clash that would go down in history. Camilla and Catherine were both called to a private drawing room by Charles, who called them both. In stark contrast to one another, the three individuals stood facing each other, the light from the chandelier illuminating their conflicting feelings. The eyes of Camilla, who was dressed in a sophisticated but icy black silk gown, were rebellious as she stood upright. The presence of Catherine, who was dressed in a plain light blue dress, exuded an air of unspoken power as she stood there calmly. Charles sat in the middle of them, his emaciated frame providing a striking contrast to the resolved look on his face. Camilla interrupted the pause with a chilly tone in her voice. "She is nothing more than Diana's shadow," she spat forth, pointing in the direction of Catherine. "Since the beginning of my existence I have been compared to her, and I have been tortured by the name. Nevertheless, I am the one who remained Charles. One of the people that supported you was me." Despite the fact that her remarks were dripping with poison, they also revealed the sheer despair of a woman who had come to the realization that she was losing everything. As a result of the explosion, Catherine did not move from her position, and her calm and steadfast stare remained locked on Camilla. It was not necessary for her to react, since her dignity was sufficient. After a long time, Charles finally turned his gaze to Camilla, his eyes weighed down by a grief that seemed to last a lifetime. The years that they had spent together were brought to his mind, moments that he had formerly misunderstood as love, but which were now exposed to be a lengthy and dazzling deceit. With his eyes fixed on Catherine and his voice weak but resolute, he gave the conclusion that would ultimately matter. His voice was quiet as he said, "Today I choose the light. According to Camilla, and that light is not you." Words were like a razor slicing through Camilla's last remaining barriers and causing her to fall. She was transfixed, her face pale and her lips squeezed into a tiny line. She remained there, paralyzed. When she turned around and left the room, the sharp click of her heels on the marble floor reverberated like a drumbeat, indicating that an era had come to an end. She realized for the first time that she had lost the war, which was not a fight for power, but rather a fight for the heart of the guy whom she believed she had won. A new will, and Diana's return contribute to the rewriting of a legacy. After removing Camilla from her position, Charles realized that this was only the beginning of the process. He needed to redefine the future of the monarchy itself in order to fulfill his obligation to make one for his sins. Once again, he called upon his legal staff to meet with him in the magnificent study at Buckingham Palace, which was surrounded by centuries of important royal history. A choice that he made that caused a quiet earthquake to be felt throughout the palace was that he ordered the full rewriting of his will. Camilla was to be completely removed from his personal estate, as well as any inheritance rights, which was a step that had never been done before in the history of the contemporary royal family. William and Catherine were given the responsibility of becoming the chief guardians of the royal assets for the next generation. This was done to ensure that the heritage of the monarchy would be preserved by individuals who exemplified both duty and compassion. The most important thing that Charles did was to give the order to have a big charity fund re-established in Diana's name. He would be the one to personally approve and establish the Princess Diana Legacy Fund, which would then be used to promote the causes that she had championed, which included providing assistance to victims of conflict, caring for children who were underprivileged, and increasing awareness about mental health. Since the news of the new will became public, Camilla has been completely cut off from the world. Her urgent calls to influential persons from the time of Queen Elizabeth II, supporters who had formerly supported her, were greeted with courteous but strong refusals because of their lack of support for her. No one had the courage to stand behind a queen who had earned the disapproval of the monarch. She eventually withdrew to her Scottish estate, a shadow that was imprisoned inside the golden cage that she had spent her whole life constructing. In the meanwhile, Charles discovered a peculiar comfort in making amends for his wrongdoings. He looked at each action as if it were a late attempt at making amends, and he spent his days monitoring the specifics of Diana's personal finance. Extensive letters were written by him to his sons. "My son, I was wrong to choose power over love," he said in a letter which he addressed to William. The letter was written in a shaky handwriting on royal stationery. "Catherine should be protected since she is the light of this kingdom. Take care not to repeat my errors." The rebirth of the Queen of Hearts. The audio recording of the King's confession entitled "I Lost a Family" was released. The phrase "she lost a kingdom" served as the conclusive and well-known endorsement of his acts. For a long time, the British people had seen him as inflexible and remote. All of a sudden, they saw a man addressing his problems with an honesty that was both raw and heartbreaking. The following is an excerpt from a social media post that went viral. "For the first time, I see a king who wears not just a crown, but a broken heart. This emotional void was filled by Catherine, Princess of Wales, who stepped into it. When she addressed the participants at a Commonwealth meeting in London, she did so while wearing a sophisticated blue outfit. Her voice was strong and genuine as she spoke to the attendees. When she stated, 'I am not here to replace anyone,' her words had a calm strength that was rather powerful. I am only here to continue the values of kindness and service that should always be at the heart of our work, said the person responsible for my presence. The speech was met with a resounding round of applause. Her popular perception was not that she was a replica of Diana, but rather that she was a continuation of her spirit. The media referred to her as the Queen of Hearts, a moniker that had previously been reserved only for Diana, but which is now being placed onto her successor, not as a distinction, but as an honor. The genuineness of her actions, which stood in striking contrast to Camilla's apparent arrogance, started to revive hope that the monarchy could still be a positive influence in the world. Charles would often be seen standing alone in the grounds of Windsor Castle, clutching an old image of Diana as the sun fell over the castle. Her grin was highlighted by the summer sunshine, giving the impression that she was still there, but observing from a distance. During those last peaceful minutes, he experienced a sense of calm that he had been searching for decades. He was aware that his time was limited. Not as a monarch, but as a man, he had deliberated and taken a decision. Not just for the members of the royal family, but also for the whole country. He had brought Diana's light back. He spoke softly into the evening air, his voice blending gently with the wind, and was accompanied by a genuine grin that was barely audible. "It is my pleasure, Diana. I was able to find myself. I am curious about your thoughts on the road that King Charles took to face his sins and make amends for the love that he had lost to Diana. Will the genuineness of Catherine be sufficient to shed light on the British monarchy in the same way as Diana did in the past?"